Hi, speaking is Ruth Kenner, and I'm speaking from my studio and channel, Get Quilts Done. And today I'm going to talk about chain piece and my 770 Bernina. And I'm going to show you a few things, and we're just going to get started, and you're going to see the direction. I'm solving problems today. All right, so go ahead and bring the camera in. This is chain piecing. It's just two pieces. Basically what it means is you piece one after the other, and they don't all have to be the same color. And when you're done, you clip them right here and you make several pieces. All right, it's a really quick method of getting things done. Here's the problem that I'm solving. You see this right here? This is what happens. Now I pulled it apart a little bit to accentuate so we can see what's going on for the camera. But what happens is they're not durable, and when you move them around, they start to come undone, and then you have to do this painstakingly difficult, cringing job of sewing back just the edges, and you haven't saved any time. So today, I'm going to show you how I solved the problem. And I do use, if you bring the camera over here, just a quick glimpse, I use my 770 Bernina. Let's begin with the 97D foot. There is so much to say about this foot, but for our purposes, just on chain piecing, we're going to concentrate on what is relevant for us. Besides the foot, you could see underneath, I have on a stitch plate. And this stitch plate has one little hole, whereas the regular stitch plate, the default one, has on it a larger hole, you can see, for doing zigzag and decorative stitches. If your machine doesn't have this, this machine came with it, but if you have bought it secondhand or for whatever reasons you don't have it, I would recommend strongly getting the single hole stitch plate, because we're all about accuracy when we're sewing little tiny pieces. The other thing about this is a D foot, which means dual feed. So we've traditionally, our sewing machines have dragged fabric through the bottom piece of fabric through the machine. And we have relied on the stickiness of the fabric. Well, now we rely on that still, but we have a little bit extra help by the dual feed being engaged. When you see a foot has the letter D, that means that it's dual feed. All right, so that's about it, but I do want to show a few things that are really relevant for what we're doing. Okay, so I put in this piece of green fabric here because you can get a better look at how the machine looks with the contrasting color. So if you look straight ahead, you can see that one side is actually wider than the other side. And that is because this side uses the idea of having a 1/4 inch seam, or a scant 1/4 inch seam, and we don't use all of the feed dogs. So at least we use all of the feed dogs on one side. And that's going to be relevant because I'm going to explain that in just a bit. The other thing that I'm just going to move this around, I'm going to show you. Hopefully we can. Okay. So you can see that right here, this is the side of the foot, and there's notches. Okay, those notches right there, and if I can get closer, yeah, there we go. So if you see that these notches are in line with the needle that comes down. So when the needle's up, and for this kind of stitching or sewing, I'm actually going to have the needle up. But even in a regular time, you could see where the needle is going to go through. So it also helps with accuracy, since, like I said, if you're doing lots of little boxes, lots of little squares and triangles, you need accuracy, because when you sew them all together, you still want the block to be the same size. The 1/4 inch behind that notch is the 1/4 inch behind, and beforehand is the 1/4 inch ahead. And we're going to use that when we're sewing, and I'll demo that and explain why that is. The other thing that really helps for accuracy, it came with the foot, D foot, is the seam guide. And the seam guide, you can see, has a little cutout section. That's so it doesn't damage the feed dogs that are exposed. Now I'm going to bring the camera back and I'm going to get a close-up of that little section here. See how it goes straight and then it goes in? There's like a cutout. If I move that, you can see it a little better. The reason that is we have the idea of sewing a scant 1/4 inch seam. The reason we do that is we have here this piece of fabric to demonstrate it, but we have the thread. So the thread is going right there. See how it goes right underneath it? You can't see it. But if I make it right in line with here, where the 1/4 inch seam is, you can see it'll make a 1/4 inch seam perfectly. And that's how exact we are going to be. We count the thread in it. And that's why you see here the term 1/4 inch seam. When we're doing this kind of exact work, we actually take in the thread to matter. That's how close we have to be. So I have the thread, the seam guide kind of matched up here already and stuck in so you can see. We just put it in flush. You don't want to push too hard because you don't want to ruin it. You don't want to damage anything. And when you screw it in, you make sure you screw it in so it's tight or snug, but not too much. You don't have to do that much force. And this, when I'm sewing, is such an asset. I just love it. I basically push it through, and I can do, not only for chain piecing, I can do for long strips, very straight stitching that goes all the way through. You don't want to push it because it'll bubble up. You just let it guide the way it works. I used to have a different stylus. I usually use this or my purple thing, and I just push it through. It works beautifully, and I'm set up for accuracy as far as the foot goes, and I'll show later on how I use this. We're looking at the sewing machine, the front part of it. That includes the sewing machine screen, which is the computerized sewing machine screen. We have the knobs or the buttons over here, a knob here, and there's 2 knobs. The important knobs I'm going to show you because there's so much to talk about, like I've said earlier about the foot. For us, we're going to talk about that button right here. When I'm talking about it and you're going to see a close-up of the screen, you won't see me using this, but you will hear it. You can hear the little sound it makes. When you press this button, you sew in reverse. But I'm going to use a stitch that when I press it really quick, it turns it into another type of stitch within it that basically is 6 short little stitches. Okay, and you'll understand more when I go through with the screen. It's the quick reverse button. That's what it's called. The other knob that's really important that I'm just showing it to you is when I'm sewing and I'm demoing it, I'm on slow. And this machine is sewing very fast. But quite often I go really fast. When you're learning a new technique, I recommend slowing yourself down according to however you feel comfortable. I'm also a bit slower when I have a camera around because I don't want to have an accident, okay? Now, there's 2 knobs here. The top knob controls the zigzag. We won't be using that today because you saw the little hole. It won't be, and I don't need it to chain piece. The bottom button or knob actually controls the length, and you can see barely here that it's changing colors to yellow. I just clear it or delete that and it goes back. But I'm going to be using it on the screen. It won't make a noise, but I'll show you. There is a way of doing it on the screen, but today's class I'm trying to concentrate just on chain piecing because there's so much to talk about, and I keep on saying that. I know. That's about it. The other thing that I am going to be using is this Clover stylus. I really like it. It's really a stylus that's excellent for ironing. The reason I'm using it instead of the Bernina stylus that it came with that I really like or really loved is I dropped it and it wasn't enough to drop it. I dropped it. I saw that I dropped it. I went to pick it up and I accidentally stepped on it, and then it was completely gone. Okay, it was broken in two. So my clumsiness has it that I'm using I'm hacking this. I did like the stylus. I go to the dealer and it's not in stock whenever I'm there. Just to know that my clumsiness sometimes gets in the way of my life. All right. Okay, now we're getting to one of my favorite parts about the sewing machine. I was very excited about getting the sewing machine. I fell in love with these dual feed sewing machines just by sitting there and sewing. But when I started to get to know at the dealers the screen and the possibilities, I was blown away. And I've had this machine for over 3 years now, and every time I sit down with it and I learn and I play with it, I'm always blown away. So I'm going to show you a few things why I really love it, and a few things for safety I like to start with, and that's really important. I showed you the stitch plate. I always make sure when I sit down that this is the same stitch plate that's on. I showed you the one little hole. So you go right here. See how there's a little picture of a stitch plate and a needle? For our purposes, we're just talking about the stitch plate. See the one with a star? That's the 9mm. That's considered the default. We have on the one little hole, it says 0mm. There's other ones around, but we have that one on, and I have it pressed. That means it won't do zigzag. The machine will control it, so I won't make a mistake and break a needle or even damage the machine. So we just start with that, and that's basic things that you start out with. The other things that I always start out with before I do it, and it takes me very little time, but because I'm explaining it to you, it may seem like I spend a lot of time. But if you're going to be sitting down and sewing for a few hours, even 5 minutes isn't so much. This basically takes me less than a minute. Okay, so this is the needle. It's in up position. Oh, sorry. Okay, so the needle, this is when the machine stops, the needle stops up, or it can stop down. My old machine that I grew up with always started in up position, and I had to crank the wheel. This machine actually, just like my previous one, gave me a choice of how to work. I usually prefer the needle going down just about all the time. When I'm chain piecing or small blocks, one after the other, I actually work in a totally different way, and I have the needle up. So far, it's the only time that I'm working always with the needle up. So I go in, and depending what I'm doing, I make sure the needle's doing what I want it to. And usually if I forget or if it's not in the right place, I get a reminder while I'm sewing. The other thing that I've gotten in a habit of doing is something we call the hoverfoot. And discovering this, I wasted a year without knowing this. So I really love the hoverfoot. I knew about it, but I didn't know this about it. So here we see the setup button. Well, that basically it's kind of like the inside of an old-fashioned watch. So I press that, and I go into where you have a picture of utility stitches, the straight stitch and the zigzag. I press plus, and then I go right in here. Again, another button. Seems like a lot of buttons, but it's really not. Once you get used to it, it flies. Okay, so you press another button there, and now you have a sewing machine. And there's a lot we can talk about, like I always say, but for our purposes, I'm just showing you this. This is, the needle is in down position, and there's a little plus. I press it, and we have the hoverfoot. One of my favorite parts about the sewing machine. So basically, when the needle goes down and you stop, because you stopped or you put it down, this hoverfoot becomes active. So it gives you a chance to maneuver around the fabric or whatever you're working on, whatever you're embellishing, if it's thread or whatever you're doing. It gives you a chance to play with it when it's up. The higher one I use when I'm using pins. I find that's very helpful. If I'm turning a lot of corners and I'm using a lot of pins, I'll use the high one. Most of the time I'm using this. I absolutely love it for applique, for specialty stitches. That's the way I go. But when I am doing chain piecing, or I am stitching long lengths of straight stitching, in general, anything straight stitching, I do that. And you can see by the picture, the needle goes down. If I, in this case, I have to put it, the needle down because I'm sewing with the needle on stop going up. It stays where it is. And I really love the hoverfoot, and I really love that I have control over it. So as much as I love it, when I don't want to use it, I don't have to. And I try to get in a good habit of, okay, whenever I'm doing something, I'm sitting down and I check what the hoverfoot is doing. So I use it to my advantage. I really think that that's a great design. Good job, Bernina, for that. All right, so we're going in, and I see that the machine is set up here, and I want to put it in. This is the way the machine is starts out. It starts out with number 1 stitch, of course, straight stitch. And because we're quilting, we have we're going to go to this section, which Bernina put in this machine, a whole section, especially for quilting and piecing. I just love that. So one of the things about it is if you take a look at the tension, this basic straight stitch is, the tension is at 525. If I go to quilting and I'm going to be using regular quilting fabric, cotton fabric, and I press this one, the tension goes right to 4.0. So I don't even have to mess with anything. It gives me a really big advantage always that my machine is set up like that, and the default settings I absolutely love for this. So what am I going to be doing differently? Well, I love to use the 1326 stitch, and I'm going to press that little question mark, another really great thing about this screen, and then I'm going to press that stitch, and I'll show you why. It's a straight stitch. It says shorter straight stitch used for piecing and patchwork, and of course end of page. So that is really nice. That's my favorite stitch for piecing. But when I am doing chain piecing, I have a few disadvantages of that stitch. So what have I done? I'm going to go into the question mark again and show you 1324 on this machine. And it's the Quilter Securing Program. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically it has 6 shorter stitches, and you press that reverse button that I showed you earlier, and then it does 6 shorter stitches to finish it. And I want that to happen while I'm piecing, when I'm piecing small blocks or small pieces together, or just chain piecing. I want that advantage. So what did I do? I go over here and I do a comparison. Of course, the zigzag's on 0, stitch length is 2.0, the tension is 4.0. The foot, I haven't gotten the upgrade yet. I really want it, but when I do, when I do get the upgrade, it will tell me what foot's in there. It does know what foot is in there because I've experimented with it. And of course, the pressure foot, 50, that I know is going to stay the same. So 2.0, let's see what happens when I press this, and it's in the default. Let me get that out. All right. So I go over here. The zigzag, of course, is the same. The tension's the same. Everything here is the same, but the length is different. So I can just change the length to be 2.0 and make it and call it a day. But I like to be in charge, okay? So Bernina has said the default stitch for that is 2.5. I want the default stitch to be 2.0. I'm in charge. Okay, so what does that do for me? Because I use this all the time, this stitch for quilting, I want it to be the default. So I have less to do. I just go in there, I press that button, and I'm good to go. And there it is, I'm in charge. Now, if I don't want that default anymore, okay, for whatever reasons, I just press this button here and it's gone. But of course I do want it. And that means, let me get back to 2. That means I press it, and if I get out of here and I change the stitch for whatever reasons or whatever is happening, I go like that, I press the clear and it goes back to the default stitch that I set up. So I really like the way Bernina has all these default stitches, so I don't have anything to think about and I can go right in. But I also really like that I am in charge and I can change a stitch to be a default stitch the way I want it to be. So that's really important. So now I'm going to show you a few other things about stitching with this, and you're going to see the screen, but you're not necessarily going to be able to see what I'm sewing. So you're going to listen and I'll explain. Okay, so I am going to go get a little bit closer here, if I can. And you can see right here on the top, see how there's 6 little, or it's hard to count, but there are 6 little stitches. Okay, so the machine is telling me that it's going to sew 6 little stitches. I'm going to have regular stitches. And I'm going to go ahead and go back out so you can see what happens. Okay, so I'm stitching away here. See how it's short little stitches? And I'm going kind of slow because I set my machine up to go slow. So you're going to see a flashing light, and the flashing light represents the reverse button, and that's what I explained earlier. I press that button, and you just heard it, and now I stitch, or I sew, and see the little 6 tiny stitches, and then it stops. And then I'm ready to start all over again. So that's what we're doing. We're taking between each little block or triangle or whatever I'm chain piecing, we're taking a less than a second, a nanosecond between each one to make sure that I don't have to repiece the edges. And once you get used to doing that, it flies just as fast as it did before. And I can see that I am on, let me get this. I am slightly off. There we go. On the stitch length. Okay, there, did it again. Okay. I have a camera in front of me, and that is why, because I usually don't work with a camera in front of me. Okay, so the other thing that I want to show you, and it's also really, really important, is let's say I start to stitch, and I'll do it. Okay. This is slow even for this. Okay, so we have, like before, we saw the flashing light that says that I have to press to end this, to end the stitch totally. But what if I don't want to? What if I want to rip it out and I want to start over again? What if I, for some reason, it's starting on that and I want to start at 0 at the beginning? And I don't want to turn off the machine to get there. Okay, so see that little triangle with a line right there that I'm pointing at? Well, I just go ahead and press that, and I'm starting over again. Voila, very easy. So that's it with the screen. Those are just basic things, and now we're going to go take a look at how the magic happens. So I'm getting ready to do the fun part. It's hard to see, but I do have the bottom thread out of the bobbin and the needle, the thread from the top coming through the needle. And I push it underneath the foot, and then I guide it above and wrap it around, and it basically cuts it. And that is one way of anchoring it, and that's my favorite way. So now I'm getting ready to do the part that I like, and I want to show you what I'm doing, and I am going to zero in. Okay, so we get really close, and the reason why I'm using these colors, like you saw before, I had green fabric, and now I have brown, is not for design purposes. It's in order that you can see what I'm doing. I experimented with different fabrics, and I found out what worked the best as far as the camera and being able to show you what I'm doing, seeing the notches. So let's get going right here. See that notch, that middle notch that I showed you before on the foot? Well, it's lined up a little bit, it goes a little bit past the fabric. And the reason I do that is I want to start sewing right away on the fabric. I had, it's set up on 1, 3, 2, 4. and we're going to go through. Now, sometimes I say I'm pushing the fabric through. I'm not. I'm actually guiding the fabric through. I just say that by mistake. This machine does all the work. It does all the work for me, and I'm just guiding it. So let's begin. And it's a little bit clumsier because usually I have my hand where the camera is, or around in front of the camera, and so I'm not able to do that this time. But you can see where it is flush but not pushed too tight against the seam guide. That's really important. So here we go. We start with 6 little stitches, and even though it started really close here, the machine is working fine. Now it is going a little slow for my taste. What can you do? Okay, that I have no choice here. Otherwise, with all the equipment around, I could have an accident. Now, this isn't as perfect as I usually like it to be because I'm not able to get in really close. And even then, I put my finger there. So you can see where I'm stopping just at that notch, just where that notch is. Now, if I don't stop exactly where I want, I can move it around a little bit because those are really tiny stitches. It's 2.0 to begin with, so I don't have to worry about it, but I can push it back. I've gotten better and better, so I never do it. Now I'm pressing the button, and you're going to hear it. And there we go. We have 6 little stitches, and I'm going to put in the next piece so you can see how smoothly it runs. Okay, and of course, usually I have them lined up, but I wanted you to see really well where I'm stopping with the camera. So we're going in 6 little stitches, and it stops, and I probably would have stopped a little bit better if I had the use of both my hands without blocking it. But we're starting again, 6 little stitches, and I'm going to turn up the speed now and line things up. And there you go. You can see this baby really takes off when I want it to. And I slow down there, and I get really good at this, so it goes a lot faster, and with practice it goes a lot faster. And you can see it stops just where I want it to, and I'm doing the next one. Okay, and we just line it up right here, and I make sure those notches, it lines up exactly where I want it to be. And when you get really good at this, it flies. And I'm only doing 3, but I could sit here for a long time. I do have an alarm go off, so I get up every hour and I stretch. Or sometimes I get up on my own. Sometimes I'm listening to music or a podcast. So when it ends, I know to stop and get up and do a little bit of exercise. But I can do this for quite a long time. I really do enjoy it. And we have 6 little stitches, solving my problem. And I'm just going to bring it out, and that's it for now. And you'll see how durable these are in the next step. Here they are, my chain pieced little pieces that are ready to go to the next stage if I wanted to sew them into a block. I could make several of these. They could be triangles. They are pressed and clipped. The important part is they're clipped and they're not going anywhere, which means we can store them, move them around, play with them, do all that we want to do with them. If I zero in on the camera a little bit, you can get a closer look. You can see how these are really staying together. So let me get on the side that the camera is, and you can see it's just staying together. There it is. I don't have to resew things. I could work with them. It is really a good system. And this is the way I chain piece forever now. Okay? And durable is the word. So that's it. I hope that this encourages you to use this system and makes it easier. I also hope that it encourages you in the future to play with your computer screen, look at the default things, see what you want to change, and personalize your digital digitized sewing machine because it's really a great thing. Here's the more of these blocks that I did specially for today. And you can see, like I said, durable is the word. Okay, I really like that. No more of problems of things coming undone. And I hope that you liked it. I encourage leaving messages if you have pointers, because I'm always willing to listen. I'm ready for new ideas all the time. Also subscribe that. And also in the future, in the farther future, I want to do one on how to cut up leaves for art quilts. So signing off, bye.